back to the Opinionated Musings of Eric and Tim and Dayton. Gentlemen, here we are again. This time we are doing the top albums of the 70s. We're going to try and do a series here. Our top albums. Yes. Very important distinction. We're going to try and break down the decades here, and we're going to go through the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s in subsequent episodes as we move along here. I got to tell you, this was a tough one for me. Yeah. And we were just talking before we decided to start recording that, this was a really hard list to put together for each of us.
How did you guys come about your list? Like I could have had all Rush albums on this. I could have had all his albums on this. So I just basically picked albums that had an impact on me. Not so much in the 70s because I was too young to probably really get into this kind of music then, but just albums from the 70s that had an impact on me. But also I thought were very, very good from like track one all the way to the end. So how did you guys come up with your list?
Well, that was one of the hard things for me that I was mentioning just before we went on air here. That I found bands that I really liked, and I would look for the songs that I like. And then I'd look at the rest of the album, and it was like, well, that was the only good song on that album. And they were like, I could pick a band that had 10 songs that I loved, but it was spread out across like 10 or 12 different albums. So it was really hard to narrow it down to the really strong, full albums for me.
My thought process initially was things that was played in my house when I was a kid. I was fortunate to have an older brother who was very much into rock and roll then, and my parents were big Beatles fans, Rolling Stones fans, so I grew up listening to a lot of that. So I went at it from that point of view, and then also picked a couple that really hit me much later in life. Like, man, that is such a great record, I've got to put it on there somewhere. So it was a little bit of both, some nostalgia, some more, I appreciate it more now because I understand what goes into making the music. So.
All right. Yeah. One of mine is definitely one that I've gotten into as an adult that I didn't even really like the band that much, when I was a kid. So cool. I'm interested because sometimes our lists overlap a lot. So I'm kind of interested. I got a feeling that maybe, is it possible that our top fives are all unique?
We'll see.
All right. Well, let's start with our honorable mentions. I'll go first. My honorable mention is a live album. It is something that I haven't put on any of my lists here in a little while, but something I'm known for including. It is Cheap Trick at BUDOKAN.
Yeah, I knew that was going to be on your site. I knew it was going to be somewhere.
That's my honorable mention.
What band is this?
Who? But they get the honorable mention just because the other albums on my list I felt were a little stronger for me personally. But, I still got to throw them in there.
Well, and honestly, it was live at BUDOKAN that really skyrocketed them because before that, they weren't doing much. That album came out and suddenly everybody was like, oh, Cheap Trick. So, yeah, that's a good choice.
Yeah. And then Dream Police and all that happened.
Yeah.
And
right.
My honorable mention is Welcome to My Nightmare from Alice Cooper.
Nice.
And Alice Cooper was somebody that was not even on my radar when I was a kid. And then when Ace Frehley went solo with Frehley's Comet, back whatever year that would have been, the first album, Tim, you might know, was that like,
oh man, that would have been
86, 87?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, about 87, 88, I think.
Well, when Alice was on tour, Frehley's Comet was opening up for him.
Okay.
So me and my girlfriend at the time kind of dove into Alice's repertoire to try to, get familiar with it because neither one of us knew, any of his music. And in the couple months leading up to that concert, we just went off the deep end for Alice Cooper and really got into him. And I'm still an Alice fan to this day. But
nice.
So I think Welcome to My Nightmare is just a really, really good, solid Alice Cooper album from the 70s. So.
Nice.
Good pick.
I'm going to have two honorable mentions. So my first one is Jailbreak from Thin Lizzy. Okay. Now, I chose it because it was their biggest commercial record. It actually has my favorite Thin Lizzy song on there, Cowboy Song, which, everybody talks about what a big hit that The Boys Are Back in Town was, and it was a huge success for them. It was their biggest chart topper. But there's other great songs on there that don't even get noticed. Running Back didn't even get released. Warriors and Emerald. There's some great songs on there. And it's unfortunate that one, like kind of in the middle of their career, it's like, was their biggest hit, and it kind of went up and kind of went back down. And then, of course, Phil let it pass, and then it was kind of over. So, but it's a great record all the way through, and it didn't quite make the cut, so it's my honorable mention. My second one, I had to pick it because it was released in 1970, and it's the only Beatles album released in 1970. So, even though it was recorded before Abbey Road, it wasn't released until after George Martin tried to do something with it, and then later Phil Spector finished the record, and it was released. It's definitely not a great Beatles album, but it's still better than a lot of stuff at the time, and I had to pick it because it's the only Beatles album that made the 70s. So those are my honorable mentions.
All right, well, coming in at number 5 for me is the first of my Kiss albums on my list. It's so funny to me that Kiss is such a strong band in my musical past, given my feelings on them currently. But I mean, I can't deny the history there. And so my number 5 pick is Destoyer.
Yeah.
That's just got the classic look on the album cover, and just great songs on that album, almost start to finish.
Yeah, it actually initially was on my list when I first started. That one and Rock and Roll Over were on there, but I just really hate Great Expectations. So because of that, it couldn't make the rest of the album is great. That one.
I like that song because I think they really tried to go for something. Most people will say they didn't get there, but they at least attempted it, I guess.
Yeah.
My number 5 is Rumours by Fleetwood Mac.
Nice.
It's an album that I think is, you can argue that every song on it's great. And to think that they were able to create what a lot of people think is their masterpiece album with the turmoil that was going on in the band at that time. It's pretty amazing. So.
Hence the name of the record.
Right. And Lindsey Buckingham is just tragically underrated as a guitar player. Always has been, always will be, probably. So
this is one that you hear like our whole life. It's always in the classic rock stations or whatever. But it wasn't until the last 10 years I really started to appreciate the album from beginning to end. And it's Boston's debut album. Man, I mean, the dude recorded most of it in his basement, for God's sake, and then I love the fact that Epic wanted them to record it in California, and then they kind of lied and and tricked them, and he still recorded it in his basement. And they did the vocals in California, and I mean, the solos are tight, the riffs are great, the vocals are wonderful, and there's not a bad song on there.
All right, number 4 for me is an album that I really only have started really delving into probably in the last year or so, and it is Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Brain Salad Surgery.
I have that on vinyl.
Nice.
Yeah, it's and I'm right there with you.
Everybody knows Carnival 9. That's the song that gets played over and over again on the radio. You either get that or Lucky Man. Those are like the only 2 E.L.P. songs that ever show up in rotation. But I finally sat down and really listened to the rest of that album. And man, there is just some great stuff going on there.
Okay, my number 4 is Houses of the Holy by Led Zeppelin. And this one it's a real battle between this one and Led Zeppelin 3. Those 2 albums were kind of flip-flopping to get on this list, but listen to each album all the way through. Houses of Holy just edged out 3 just a little bit. And that was the one I was talking about earlier, that when I was young, I was never really a Zeppelin fan. Not a huge Zeppelin fan now even, but you can't argue that their great songs are great. And I think House of the Holy is in my opinion, is probably their best album.
Nice. Okay, so as much as I didn't want to pick this one, I had to because it has two of my favorite Zeppelin songs on it. And of course, it's, well, untitled, but Led Zeppelin 4. It was one of those, my brother was a big Zeppelin fan when we were growing up. So, I was familiar with the song Remains the Same, of course, seen the movie and the concert, and, you heard these songs, and I saw that discussion you had about Stairway to Heaven being, you said overrated, but I think it's more overplayed because it's a great song. But
right.
I prefer side 2 than side 1. Going to California, I think, is a spectacular song. And me being a drummer, there's no drums in it, but I don't care. It's wonderful. I just love the guitar in it, and then even though it's a cover, When the Levee Breaks, I just love that, and it's a great song. And then of course, Misty Mountain Hop and Four Sticks. There's just so many from beginning to end. It's a great song. It's a great record, and it was one that much later I got into,
Right.
So. But yeah,
me too. Much, like in my adult life is when I really got into.
Yeah.
I may have to just sit down and start listening to some more Zeppelin. They're just one of those bands that I never dove into. The stuff I've heard, like you said, Eric, the stuff that's great is absolutely fantastic. It's stellar. But I've never really sat and done that deep dive on them that I probably should get around to.
Honestly, if you give Jimmy Page an acoustic guitar, he's going to put it in some weird tuning and he's going to come up with something killer. My favorite Zeppelin songs are the Tangerines. Yeah. Going to California, that's the way. Just those kind of stuff are my favorite Zeppelin songs.
All right, well, that brings us around to number 3, and my pick is Rush 2112.
Ooh.
Nice.
Not a shabby pick.
I mean, that's an album. There was, Rush had done some great stuff before that album. There was some awesome stuff on their albums before 2112. But 2112 was when they just, kicked it, way, way up.
Right.
Yeah, and honestly, I had quite a few Rush albums on my list, but it's hard to pick. It's hard to pick,
Yeah, like you were saying earlier, we could have just, picked a band, done Rush, and the top Rush albums from the 70s. Okay, let's just go with those.
Yeah, my whole list could have been Rush albums. Okay, my number 3 is the Van Halen 2 album.
Nice.
My favorite Van Halen album for sure. What are you going to say? It's, any of the 70s Van Halen albums could have been on this list, but that's my favorite Van Halen album. So that's why it is my number 3.
My number 3 was very much present when I was a little kid. I remember sitting there looking at the album cover a lot and just kind of like staring at it, not quite as much as another one, but it's just a lot of fun, and there's so many great songs on it. It's a double record, and my number 3 is Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. I mean, I love the first track, Funeral for a Friend and Love Lies Bleeding, 11 minutes long. The first lyric doesn't start until 6 minutes into the song. It's moody, it rocks once it kicks in, and it just sets the tone for the whole album. And I love the fact that, Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting's on there, of course, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And then you have stuff like Gray Seal. And then the one that always catches me off guard is Social Disease. It's so country, but I still love it.
He's one of those artists that went through so many different phases and periods and styles and genres. I mean, he's really just done about everything you can imagine musically.
Yeah.
All right, my number 2 pick, I think is going to shock some people for not being my number 1 pick, and that's because it is Van Halen's debut album. I mean, if I talk about the best albums of the 70s, for me, that album had such an impact. Again, like we were talking about earlier, a lot of that stuff I didn't discover until later on, like in the 80s when I was a teenager, because I was just too little. And I grew up in a very religious household, and, we had gospel music and some one country station that my dad would play in their car every so often. But that was it for my musical exposure. So I didn't get into Van Halen until much later. But if I go back to and listen to the albums of the 70s, it's that debut album. It's Eruption. It's You Really Got Me, Running with the Devil. You know, just that powerhouse kickoff of an album. And it just kind of told the world, here's Van Halen.
Right. Okay. Well, my number 2 is the only Kiss album on my list. And there's an asterisk because it's not technically a Kiss album. It's the 78 Ace Frehley solo album. They all did their solo album. And
All right.
That album was pretty much the album that kind of, you know, solidified me wanting to be a guitar player. You know, to this day, I love every track on it. And I listen to it constantly. So it's just a fantastic album. I honestly think that every song on that album is great. So.
Yeah.
It's the best Kiss album that Kiss didn't actually make.
Right.
Yeah. And I think I actually still have mine from when I bought it as a little kid. I still have my record for him. So yeah, and you're right. It's especially out of the solo ones that they did, it just blows the other 3 away.
Right.
You know, so.
You know, what Ace did with his album is he proved to himself that what I think was in the back of his mind already, his album proved to him that he could go on without Kiss. And so I think management's idea or whatever of maybe letting them do it and then they'll come back and they'll be Kiss again and they'll all be happy. I think it kind of backfired and it, you know, Ace was even more ready to leave the band at that point, I think. So
it's my turn to pick a Rush album. So it was a challenge, but after listening to them and I chose Fly By Night because I mean it's great all the way through and it's the first one with Neil and you can really tell the giant leap they took from the first record to this one. Production was just better. It was a tighter songwriting. There are 2 songs on there, Best I Can and In the End, that were actually written before Peart joined. And but you could just tell the lyrics were better. It's just a great record. And I mean, and there's not a bad song on there. And
you'll get no argument from me.
Right. Well, it was a snapshot of like, okay, this is how good we're going to be. We are right now with just one album with him. And we're only going to get better. And they did. I mean, it just said, you know, here's the better lyrics. Here's a little bit, throw a little fantasy in here. Here's some, here's the beginning of the, you know, prog rock and that we're going to do. And yeah, it's just it's a stellar record, you know?
You know, what an amazing, for 3 guys. I mean, Neil made Alex and Geddy better. Geddy made Alex and Neil better. Alex made Geddy and, you know what I mean? It's like they were just such a good combination of guys and talent.
Yeah.
That I don't think we're ever going to see again, but they each made you know, the other ones even better. That's just awesome.
Yeah.
Pick is my other Kiss album, Alive 2.
Oh, nice.
When I think about albums, you know, I think LPs. And if you want that LP experience, I don't think you could get a better pick than holding that double album cover in your hands and opening it up and seeing that stage that they had there. And then, you know, pulling out the inserts and just going through that album, putting on your headphones and just, I'm at a Kiss concert! You know, you had that feeling of being there, being in the moment. And it's just something that I don't think any other band has actually achieved.
My number 1 is actually a little bit overlap from Dayton's, and it is the 76 debut album from Boston.
Nice.
You want to talk about an album that every single track is solid? I mean, every track's almost a hit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
FM radio, you know, FM classic rock radio plays, I think, just about every song off that album. You know?
Yeah.
And like you were saying, Tom Scholz, you know, was a genius.
Yeah.
Whiz kid kind of deal. I mean, he played the guitars, you know, just the overdubbing, the layered guitars.
Yeah.
You know, played the bass on it. You know, and don't get me started on Jeff Lynne's vocals. I mean, in my opinion, maybe the best rock classic rock singer out there. Definitely top 3. I don't think there's, any question. So just a fantastic album from, the opening track to the very end. So Boston.
When we picked the 70s decade, I pretty much knew what my number one was going to be from the get-go, and mostly because it was just a big part of my childhood, and it happened to be one of my mom's favorite records. And
I'm excited because I honestly have zero idea.
It is Hotel California from the Eagles.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
I just the title track alone, it's moody. It's kind of creepy. You kind of spend the whole song trying to figure out what they're talking about, and every single time you get a little bit something out of it. And the last 3 minutes of the song is Walsh and Felder trading off solos.
Going off.
And they're not ripping it, but they're so good. And of course you have
that's one of the perfect solos.
Yes.
In rock and roll.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. And and just from beginning to end, Wasted Time, New Kid in Town, just every song is so good. The only weak one is Pretty Maids All in a Row, which was,
I like that song.
It's fine. Yeah. I think it's probably the weakest out of all of them.
Yeah, probably.
And it was Walsh's first record, and it was the last one. Randy Meisner, the bass player, left after this. But man, it's just such a staple of classic rock radio, and I think an argument can be made that the Eagles were probably one of the greatest American classic rock bands just because of what they did.
With the Eagles, I personally, they're underrated in my mind because I don't really throw an Eagles album on and play it too much. They don't really enter my mind. Like on this list, I didn't even think about the Eagles, I'll be honest with you. But when you listen to Hotel California, or you listen to this, Take It Easy or whatever,
yeah,
those are great songs,
yeah,
great vocals. And it, it says something about how good the songwriting is when I can like a Don Henley song, because I think Don Henley's an ass.
Well, he is, but it's and that what also was impressive is like everybody in the band sings. Everybody, they all
they're great.
Yeah, and the harmonies are there, and it's just unfortunate. I guess it worked out in a way after the long run, and then their tour they broke up, and then they got back together in the 90s, but. Out of all their albums, I think Hotel California actually, and it was, if I remember right, it was Rumours that actually beat that for album of the year.
Really? Okay.
All right. Well, that is our top 5 picks for our favorite albums of the 70s. If you guys got any other albums that you think we missed or stuff you want to talk about, or you just want to rip us a new one because we picked something you don't like, leave it in the comments. Let us know. Eric, Dayton, this has been another fun episode to do with you guys, and we will see you guys next time.
See you.
See you later. Golf clap.
Thank you. D D da da da. Whatever the hell else you want to throw in there.
I thought you were going to picture of a penis.
What?
Go away.
Come again.
Songs like that in the ballads, but
no, of course not. You can be wrong all you want. That's fine.
You know what? Let's do the whole thing over again.